She once said that she never wanted fame. It just happened. She was not the kind of actress who chased the spotlight or sought out attention. Yet from the very first moment Michelle Pfeiffer appeared on screen, the world could not look away. Something about her presence, that quiet intensity, that haunting gaze, made everything around her blur into silence. She was unforgettable, even when she tried not to be. In the 80s, Michelle Pfeiffer was not just a star. She was a symbol of elegance, of mystery, of something untouchable. Her beauty was not soft or sweet. It was arresting, cold, almost dangerous. She often played women who were hard to reach, hard to love, but impossible to forget. Critics called her a modern Garbo, a face that told 1,000 stories without saying a word. Directors designed entire scenes around the way she looked when she did nothing at all. But beauty, no matter how rare, is not armor. And mystery is not always a choice. Sometimes it is a shield. Over the years, the image of Michelle Pfeiffer became something sacred, something distant. She gave so little of herself off-screen that the public filled in the blanks. They projected strength onto her silences, control onto her poise. But behind those layers was a woman constantly questioning, constantly searching. Today, if you see her on screen, something has shifted. She no longer hides behind the glow. She does not seem to care about being adored. She speaks more plainly. She smiles more easily. And the roles she chooses no longer demand that she be beautiful. They ask that she be real. So what happened to Michelle Pfeiffer, the ice goddess of 80s cinema? Why did she disappear at the height of her power? And what drew her back after all those years? Was it the cruelty of an industry that forgets its women? Or was it her own decision to vanish, to reclaim the parts of herself that fame refused to see? This is not a comeback story in the traditional sense. It is the story of a woman who survived the dream factory with her soul intact. It is the story of what it cost to be seen as perfect for too long. And more importantly, what it means to finally be seen as human. The truth is, Michelle Pfeiffer never stopped being great. We just stopped paying attention. Michelle Pfeiffer did not arrive in Hollywood with a clear plan or a polished resume. She was not a child star. She did not grow up on sound stages or in dance studios. She came from a small town in California, the second of 4 children in a modest working-class family. Her father worked in air conditioning and heating. Her mother was a homemaker. The Pfeiffers were not connected to the film industry. They were ordinary, and Michelle was, in many ways, an ordinary girl. Shy, quiet, observant. She went to college intending to become a court stenographer. Acting was not a childhood dream. It was an accident, or maybe a detour. After winning a local beauty pageant in 1978, she earned a trip to Los Angeles and a few early auditions. Her first roles were forgettable, and she often found herself typecast as the pretty girlfriend or the silent background beauty. Films like Falling in Love Again and The Hollywood Nights gave her screen time, but not substance. Then came Grease 2, a sequel no one asked for and few remember fondly. Michelle was cast as the lead. It was supposed to be her big break. It turned into a punchline. Critics were harsh. The box office was worse. For a lesser actress, this might have been the end. But for Michelle, it became a strange kind of beginning. She knew she had more to give. More than a face, more than a figure. She dug deep, took acting lessons, studied character work, prepared for something better. That something came in the form of Scarface. In 1983, she stepped into the role of Elvira Hancock, the icy, drug-addled wife of a rising crime lord. It was a role of sharp edges and quiet despair. Her screen time was limited, but she carved herself into the memory of every scene she touched. Al Pacino later admitted that he was skeptical of her casting, but by the end of filming, he was in awe. So was the industry. Suddenly, Michelle Pfeiffer was not just beautiful. She was dangerous, intelligent, enigmatic. People began to see that there was more to her than cheekbones and cool detachment. She could act. She could devastate without raising her voice. In the years that followed, she built one of the most intriguing resumes in Hollywood. The Witches of Eastwick showed her comedic instincts. Dangerous Liaisons exposed her emotional depth. And then came The Fabulous Baker Boys. That performance changed everything. There is a moment in that film where Michelle, dressed in a slinky red gown, sings "Makin' Whoopee" while lying across a piano. The scene became iconic. But it was not just the sex appeal that made it unforgettable. It was the sadness behind her eyes. The way she used silence as dialogue. The way she invited the audience to see not just a character, but a woman fighting to be seen on her own terms. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination and solidified her as more than just a star. She had become an artist, a muse, a mystery. By the early 1992nd, Michelle Pfeiffer was at the top. She could have chosen the safe path. Romantic comedies, big studio franchises. But she kept surprising everyone. She took risks. She played Catwoman in Batman Returns, turning what could have been a cartoon into a haunting portrayal of feminine rage. She joined Scorsese for The Age of Innocence and made repression look poetic. She gave voice to complicated, wounded, fully formed women at a time when Hollywood rarely allowed them to exist. She was adored, she was respected, but she was also unknowable. Michelle rarely gave interviews. When she did, she deflected. She did not chase celebrity. She avoided the spotlight when she could. And because of that, she became even more fascinating. The less she said, the more people projected onto her. Looking back, it becomes clear that Michelle Pfeiffer's rise was never just about talent or beauty. It was about resistance. She resisted the roles that tried to define her. She resisted the fame that tried to own her. And in doing so, she became something few in Hollywood ever managed to become. She became her own creation. At the height of her career, Michelle Pfeiffer seemed untouchable. She had the acclaim, the awards, the critical respect, and the audience's affection. Every director wanted to work with her. Every magazine wanted her face on the cover. And yet, just as she reached the summit, something in her began to shift. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. At first, there were still roles, still red carpets, still moments of brilliance. But there was also a hesitation, a subtle pulling back. The kinds of characters she played began to change. They were no longer the center of attention, but rather women in transition, women drifting, women breaking. Films like Up Close and Personal and The Deep End of the Ocean showed her playing characters that mirrored a kind of internal unraveling. She was no longer portraying fantasy. She was stepping into something messier. And then, without fanfare, she stepped away. She never announced a retirement. She never staged a goodbye. She simply disappeared from the screen for years. One role every few years, sometimes none at all. The industry took notice, but it did not understand. Where did Michelle Pfeiffer go, and why? The answers came later. In interviews, she spoke about the exhaustion, about the way Hollywood had shifted beneath her, about how motherhood changed her priorities. She adopted her daughter Claudia in 1993 and gave birth to her son John in 1994. She wanted to be there, to be present, to be real. The sets could wait. The scripts could gather dust. Her children could not. At the same time, Hollywood was growing colder to women her age. The scripts coming in were less inspiring. The industry that once built itself around her was now chasing younger stars, louder names, faster returns. Michelle did not rage against this change. She simply walked away from it, with grace, with purpose, and yet, something within her still stirred. The artist inside her never truly stopped working. She would speak about reading scripts during her break, turning them down, waiting for the one that felt worth the return. She was not chasing relevance. She was protecting her voice, her standards. In 2007, she returned with Stardust, playing a villainous witch obsessed with beauty and youth. It was a brilliant piece of casting. Here was Michelle Pfeiffer, once the face of untouchable allure, now gleefully deconstructing that image. She embraced the grotesque, the aging, the absurd, and she did it with relish. The performance was a wink, a rebellion, a reclamation, but it was not the full comeback. Not yet. That would come later, in smaller, more surprising choices, in films like Cherry and Mother, in roles that did not demand glamour, but instead leaned into strangeness and sorrow. Her work in French Exit was particularly striking. As a wealthy widow descending into emotional ruin, Michelle offered a performance that felt unfiltered. There was no attempt to be likable, no effort to be adored. She played a woman on the edge, and she did it with a kind of quiet daring that critics could not ignore. It became clear that the Michelle Pfeiffer of now was no longer interested in playing the game. She was rewriting it. Her physical transformation was also part of the shift. The flawless face of the 80s was now marked by time. But instead of hiding from the camera, she leaned into it. The lines around her eyes became part of the story. The softness in her features reflected a woman who had lived, who had loved, who had hurt. The industry took time to catch up, but audiences noticed, especially those who had grown up with her. They saw not a fallen star, but a rising woman, one who had the courage to change, to vanish, to return. Her shift was not a fall, it was a turning, away from the illusion, towards something honest. In a business obsessed with reinvention, Michelle Pfeiffer did something even rarer. She embraced evolution. Michelle Pfeiffer today is not chasing a spotlight. She is standing in it only when she chooses. And when she does, there is a quiet command in her presence. No longer the icy enigma of her youth. She is now something deeper. She is a woman who has come back not to reclaim a throne, but to rewrite the story of what that throne ever meant. Her current roles reflect this evolution. In recent years, she has played women on the edges of power, of sanity, of society. These are not the ethereal, distant beauties of her early career. These are complex, broken, fascinating characters. Women with pasts, women with flaws, women who reflect something back at the viewer that is not polished, but raw. In French Exit, she was both tragic and hilarious. A woman unraveling while maintaining a posture of elegance, delivering devastating lines with deadpan grace. The performance earned her critical acclaim and reminded the world that Michelle Pfeiffer never lost her gift. She had only been waiting for stories worth telling. In The First Lady, she stepped into the shoes of Betty Ford. This was not a flashy role. It required restraint, dignity, introspection. And Michelle gave all of that, plus something more. She gave a sense of history, a sense of burden, a sense of what it means to be visible while carrying invisible weight. Even her appearance speaks volumes now. The face once revered for its symmetry and flawlessness now carries the marks of time. But instead of hiding them, Michelle seems to wear them with pride. She does not try to erase the years. She honors them. And in doing so, she becomes even more magnetic. Off-screen, she is surprisingly candid. She has spoken about anxiety, about motherhood, about aging. She has admitted that there were times in her career when she felt overwhelmed, insecure, unsure. She has talked about stepping away not because she lost interest in acting, but because she lost interest in everything else that came with it. There is power in that honesty. There is power in her decision to build a life outside the screen. She has been married for decades to David E. Kelley, a writer and producer in his own right. They live a relatively quiet life, far from the chaos of Hollywood. That stability seems to have given her the freedom to return to acting with new purpose. She is also using her platform for causes she believes in: environmental issues, clean beauty, public health. She launched a fragrance line not as a celebrity brand, but as a conscious choice to make something safe and sustainable. She speaks with intelligence and intention. She does not sell herself. She shares herself. Her interviews are filled with laughter now, with reflection. She does not carry the need to impress. She is no longer building a persona. She is living a life The way the world sees her has changed as well. No longer a symbol, no longer an unreachable fantasy. Now, she is a reference point, a reminder that beauty evolves, that strength can be quiet, that relevance does not require reinvention every 5 years. Younger generations discover her through streaming platforms and old clips. They see her in her prime and marvel. But those who have followed her journey see something else. They see a woman who has weathered the highs and lows with dignity. A woman who has nothing left to prove, and yet continues to surprise. Michelle Pfeiffer today is not the version of herself the world once tried to contain. She is freer, sharper, more interesting. She is what happens when a person stops performing and starts choosing. When an artist reclaims the brush and paints her own portrait, there is something profoundly rare about the way Michelle Pfeiffer has navigated fame. In an industry that feeds on transformation, she did not reinvent herself through shock or spectacle. She changed by choosing stillness. She evolved by saying no. And that resistance, that quiet defiance, has become her most powerful act. Most actors age. A few endure. But only a handful transcend. Michelle Pfeiffer belongs to that final category. Her early career gave us one version of her, the shimmering screen siren who seemed carved from marble. Her later years have given us another version, one that feels less curated, more lived in, more human. The shift is not only fascinating, it is important, because in watching her journey, we are forced to confront the way we consume women in Hollywood. We marvel at their beauty, we mythologize their youth, and when time touches them, we look away. Michelle Pfeiffer did not beg us to keep looking. She simply stepped out of the frame. And years later, when she returned, it was not to ask for attention. It was to offer something richer, herself. She has aged not with perfection, but with clarity. Not with a polished facade, but with visible grace. Her artistry has matured. Her choices reflect wisdom. She no longer plays to please. She plays to express. There is also a certain courage in how she engages with the public now. She admits to feeling insecure. She talks about the years she lost to doubt and overthinking. She has opened up about being a people pleaser early in her career, about the discomfort of being treated like a commodity. And in doing so, she has stripped away the illusion that stars must be flawless to be admired. What emerges is a portrait of a woman who has grown more herself with every passing year. She is not clinging to the past. She is not chasing youth. She is not trying to rewrite her legacy. She is simply continuing it, page by page, at her own rhythm. And what does that legacy look like? It is not a straight line of box office hits. It is not a collection of awards. It is something less tangible, but more enduring. It is the feeling she leaves behind in every role, the way she commands silence, the way she makes an audience lean in, the way she reminds us that power does not always need to be loud. Michelle Pfeiffer teaches us that relevance is not measured by how often you appear. It is measured by how deeply you resonate. That beauty is not something to hold on to. It is something to transform with. And that leaving the spotlight can sometimes be the most honest form of self-preservation. So yes, we loved her then. But do we love her more now? That answer may say more about us than about her. Because if we value resilience, intelligence, and quiet evolution, then Michelle Pfeiffer is not just someone we should admire, she is someone we should study. There is a moment that plays over and over in the minds of those who remember. Michelle Pfeiffer draped across a piano, her voice barely touching the lyrics of Make and Whoopee, her eyes full of something no script could fully explain. That moment captured more than performance. It captured presence. It captured a kind of cinematic magic that belongs to a very specific time in Hollywood. A time that felt more intimate, more mysterious, more willing to let silence say everything. But time moves forward, always. And Hollywood, as it often does, moved on. New stars rose. Tastes shifted. The hunger for immediacy replaced the longing for mystique. In that noisy evolution, The quiet ones often get forgotten. But Michelle Pfeiffer did not vanish. She stepped back. She chose something more personal, something less performative. And in doing so, she preserved something rare. To think of her now is to think of two timelines. One, the eternal presence captured in films that have aged with elegance. The other, a private life, lived far from the flashbulbs, full of choices that most people will never see. Between the two lies a truth that defies the usual arc of stardom. Michelle Pfeiffer did not lose herself in fame. She stepped out of it and returned with more of herself than ever before. Nostalgia does strange things to memory. It softens it. It stretches it. It paints the past in colors that were never quite real. But with Michelle, the nostalgia is earned. Because even at her most inaccessible, she gave us something honest. A performance that held something back. A face that invited interpretation. A career that never chased applause but often earned it. For those who grew up watching her, there is a kind of ache now when she reappears. Not because she has changed too much, but because she has changed in all the ways we understand. The lines around her eyes match our own. The gentler voice, the wiser gaze. She no longer represents an ideal, she reflects something more powerful: continuity, endurance, a quiet refusal to disappear. There are many ways to define a legacy: awards, box office numbers, headlines, but perhaps the most meaningful measure is this. Years after her most iconic roles, when her name appears in the credits, people still feel something. They still lean forward. They still remember. And that kind of presence does not fade. It lingers. It hums beneath the noise of new faces and faster fame. Michelle Pfeiffer's story is not one of reinvention. It is one of return, of re-entry, of rediscovery. It reminds us that stepping away is not failure, that silence is not absence, that growing older is not a loss of beauty, but an evolution of grace. In the end, she is not just a memory from a golden era. She is a thread that connects it to now, a living proof that some stars do not burn out. They simply burn more softly. And in that softness, there is strength, there is mystery, there is Michelle.